Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now here are your hosts, R. Blank and Stephanie Warner.
Living off the grid seems like it would be ultra scary for some, while for others it would be a step towards freedom. Our guest today is Shannon Rowan, a Wi-Fi refugee, social critic, free-thinking fine artist, writer, geopolitical author and researcher, and EMF awareness activist. She lives fully off-grid in the wilds of Northern California. She's the author of Wi-Fi Refugee, Plight of the Modern-day Canary. Let's take a deep dive into disconnection today. Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, Shannon.
Thank you, R. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course. No, thank you for making the time. So just as a starting point for our listeners, we've covered EHS in several episodes of the Healthier Tech Podcast, including in episode 4 with Lloyd Burrell and in episode 5 with Kathy Cook. And I'd encourage our listeners interested in this topic to check out those episodes as well, which we'll link in the show notes. As a starting point, can you explain to those listeners who might not know the term in as kind of as simple a term as you feel comfortable expressing?
Sure.
What is EHS?
Well, I call it exploding head syndrome. No, that's a little joke I had with my partner. Because for me, that was the primary symptom was my head felt like it was exploding. Very painful head pain, migraines, chronic when I was in the soup, as I call it. So triggered by electromagnetic fields, artificial electromagnetic fields, mostly the radio frequency, higher frequency fields were the primary trigger for me that led me to fleeing to the wilderness. But additionally, I found that lower frequencies, like coming from appliances and power lines and things, had a different kind of health impact. Also, debilitating, but not the acute pain. I felt more from the high frequency Wi-Fi, cell phones, cell towers. So it's actually electro-hypersensitivity is what the acronym, stands for. Sometimes it's called electrosensitivity or electromagnetic sensitivity. So there's various terms. It used to be called microwave syndrome or microwave sickness prior to these newer labels, and attributed mostly to like radar operators, people who had high levels of exposures before sort of the rest of us start having the same levels or greater levels of exposure with the ubiquity, I think is the right word, of the of these wireless grids, that are all around us now.
Yeah, and so did I understand you correctly that you experience maybe lack of a better term, different flavors of symptoms from different natures of exposure?
Absolutely. And once I kind of realized what was affecting me, why, I was having these symptoms, what was triggering them, I became more aware of the triggers and the effects and did a lot of experimentation with that, getting away from different things, seeing how I felt, kind of did my own sort of science project, experiments on myself a lot, especially in the early days of this when I was trying to figure out what was going on and what to do about it. So I definitely feel that things like low frequency fields would have a sort of chronic fatigue effect more than sort of the acute symptoms like I was talking about. With the higher frequency, it was like head pains, kind of tingly electrocution feelings through my body, chest pain, heart arrhythmia. So kind of more alarming symptoms, but the other symptoms can be, affect us over time more in a kind of sneakier way. So like, I think there's a lot of cancers have been attributed to things like dirty electricity, living near power lines, higher incidence of childhood leukemia, even asthma, associated with living near like high tension power lines. So there's a lot of different research done into this and effects listed as to like what can cause what. So it's just as dangerous really to have the low frequency fields. And what I want to say about living off grid as a caution to people, because it seems like that could just be the answer. but a lot of off-grid communities have really high levels of dirty electricity from generators. And I feel horrible. I went to visit one recently and I did not feel good there. I was really having like, like I said, I mean, I'm more sensitive, I'm more aware of this now, so I can tell, especially because I live in a place where I feel really good. And so then when you compare that to going somewhere you don't, I can feel it more quickly, not as acutely. I mean, I wasn't having sort of the high frequency reaction, but I do feel like this sort of overall malaise and sort of fatigue and oppression, if you will.
So,
Mhm.
I think it's really interesting that you kind of figured out that you had the sensitivity to different types of fields as well. Can you talk a little bit? I just want to step back a little. Can you talk about the process that you took to kind of figure out which frequencies did what, and even maybe even a step farther back to what was it that made you realize that this is what these frequencies that was actually causing you to feel all these symptoms?
Yeah, it started with my cell phone, I realized was causing me pain. I upgraded it to a smartphone, in 2012, but it took a couple of years before I really started having those symptoms. And also they put smart meters on our home in the same year. So I think I was having other symptoms like insomnia, night sweats, brain fog, things I didn't know. I had no idea what was triggering it. It took a trip I took to Bali, actually, a really long journey to discover, first of all, that I was sleeping better there, and realizing the only difference that I could link to was the fact that there was no Wi-Fi. I mean, I kind of just noticed that, like I stored it in my head for later, for future reference, because I didn't understand why I was sleeping better and feeling more refreshed when I was having like asthma problems there from the trash burning. And I was waking with these coughs, and I was having, I had this chronic like infection the whole time I was there. So, but I felt more refreshed. I felt different, and I felt better in a way, even with this cough. Right. So that kind of just was I just stored that away. And then when I got home, the 30 hours travel back in the planes, which is a horrible, if you want the horrors of electromagnetic fields, travel in an airplane, stay in an airport, because you've got every possible kind of trigger. You've got now with the Wi-Fi on board, people using their devices the whole flight. The radar, and you're in a metal cage, it's reflecting all over the place. There's no way you can do anything about grounding or, doing, even trying to shield from that. It's very difficult. And you've got chemicals sprayed everywhere. I mean, it's just the most absolutely, kind of worst environment you could be in, like health wise. So 30 hours of that with no real sleep. And then coming home from that, I collapsed. I think I had adrenal collapse of some kind. I couldn't get out of bed for about a week almost. I couldn't go to work. And so when I finally came out of that, I felt like a coma or something. I was more sensitive, and I was more aware of these the feelings I was getting from these cell phones. I'd hold my phone, and I remember the moment I stood there and I thought, why am I ignoring my body's signaling of pain? Like, I'm holding this thing, I'm feeling the pain shooting through my arm. I feel it against my head, and I would just send one text or hold the phone for a few minutes, put it down, and I'd feel this shooting kind of pain through my arm, electrical. Like, all I can relate it to is sort of like if you've ever been electrocuted, you put your finger in a socket or something, and you felt that zapping through your arm, and it continued and stayed there for about half an hour after.
Wow.
So I noticed that, and I was like, this is crazy. Why am I still doing this? Because I'm like, why am I ignoring my body's signals that something's wrong? And I thought, I can't ignore this anymore. This is really causing me pain. I have to find out more about this. So that was kind of the first step. I mean, I had an awareness from years before that cell phones weren't good for you, but I didn't really take it that seriously. I thought, well, as long as I don't constantly use it or put it next to my head all the time or sleep with it, then, it's fine. So I really hadn't investigated it thoroughly. So that prompted me to do research. I did find out about electrosensitivity pretty quickly after I started saying, researching, symptoms from cell phones or something. Whatever I put in, I tried to describe my symptoms, put it into a search engine. And I was like, wow, there's all these people who have this same problem. And I found out about the EMF, it was a Yahoo group, EMF Refugee, that I got on, after a while. It wasn't right away. But at first I was like, okay, the cell phone's doing this to me. So that's the, step number one. Step number two was like, let's try using it less. But then I found that wasn't really working well because people kept trying to contact me on it. It was difficult to like have it and kind of just use it part of the time. Eventually just said after a few months of it, I was like, I'm getting rid of it, which was a big, bold move when I had my own business. I had a dog walking business, and I had to kind of retrain all my clients to call my landline, leave me messages there, send me emails. It was actually really liberating because I wasn't constantly getting texts from everybody all the time from my clients when they didn't really need to, not emergencies. You don't realize you're being constantly harassed by being on call all the time like that, and that you don't have space for yourself. So actually it was like a huge relief to me, even though it felt a little bit socially isolating because a lot of my friends just kind of fell off the map once they couldn't text me. And that's still the case. Like there's people I meet, if they can't text me, then they're just not going to stay in touch with me. And so that was a strange kind of thing to wake up to, that was happening with me, my friends and socially, but interesting nonetheless. So that was like the first step, was dealing with my cell phone. But I noticed I didn't want to accept this. I just want to say that I didn't want to give up my cell phone. I didn't want to be this, social pariah. Like I didn't want to do this, but it was so painful. And then I found that I was having trouble near Wi-Fi routers. I didn't actually have Wi-Fi of my own. I never signed up for that at the time. It was optional. You didn't just get it automatically. You had to pay extra or something, So I didn't have any Wi-Fi with my modem or anything. I always had cable. And I was in the city though. And so I was in an apartment, building, a house converted into an apartment. And so what I found out after I talked to neighbors was a Wi-Fi router they had was on a top shelf right under my bed,
Wow.
for like years. And so I'd been having this horrible sleep. So I asked, could they turn it off at night, please? Because I can't remember all the steps of like how I figured out. Well, I thought of that thing in Bali where I'm like, okay, I sleep better without Wi-Fi. I think that's a thing, So but what I really did was, the main thing was that my partner and I, he stuck through this with me this whole time, which is really rare. We're like talking 9 years now, almost, right? So, and we've had to move a lot and everything. Well, we started going and renting cabins off grid in the like Shenandoah Mountains. We were living in Washington, D.C. And so we went to these cabins on the Appalachian Trail that were no electricity, usually no cell phone reception. You sometimes had to hike into them. And I just was like, let's go and see what it feels like there. I just need to like start testing this out. And oh my gosh, the relief was just so palpable and immediate and it's kind of like, it wasn't just that I was out of the acute pain. I felt like enlivened and like a kid again, like a lot of energy. I felt joyful. I wanted to play, and I felt this in my partner too. And it was like, just the night and day difference was hard to ignore. And we did this repeatedly. I slept better. I slept really well. We started to go camping. We found a spot that wasn't too far away, and I was camping like until it got too cold. I started camping most days of the week because I found that I wasn't functioning well without good sleep, which is kind of what I think most of us can relate to. If you don't sleep well, you don't function well. You can kind of lose your mind. You can like emotionally be really unstable and angry at people, and so my sleep was like the key to this. The only way I was able to survive and stay in the city as long as we did until we moved was getting better sleep. And what we ended up doing is building a Faraday cage around the bed. We built, Sam built, he got like aluminum screening and some wood, and he made a little cage for us. And it worked. We closed all the gaps with like aluminum tape. And honestly, I don't think it would work as well today with like the 4G and the 4G just started, but with 5G, I don't think that works now. But it worked then. We measured. I got a meter. That was another one of the first things I did when I started understanding what was going on. And the meter helped me as well, because the meter helped me know where the things were coming from, what frequencies, and then I could base like how I was feeling, knowing what, we turned things off. We turned off breakers, turned back on breakers, turned off appliances. So there was all these tests, and we did this repeatedly through different houses that we lived in and where we moved to. So I started to understand that like on the dirty electricity meter, like the Graham Stetzer, meters, when you plug them in, that anything over 100 on there, I didn't feel good. I felt tired, like chronically tired. And so under that, if it was under 50, I felt a lot better, so, and I've tested this on other people who don't necessarily call themselves electrosensitive. I've just helped somebody recently who's been experiencing chronic Lyme and like some, serious problems. And I stepped into his home and I was like, whoa, I'm like, it doesn't feel good in here. I mean, I gave him my book and everything. And I was like, I got to check your dirty electricity. I mean, obviously had Wi-Fi and everything too, but I checked that and it was like huge spiking crazy. I mean, people have wiring problems in their house they're not aware of. So it was going up, it was like 1,000 something, 3,000 something in one of them. And I'm like, this is really unhealthy. Like, this is very unhealthy in here. And he started having his health problems after he moved into this house too, which is interesting. Well, I got the filters in. He actually felt an immediate difference. And his dog did. That was what was interesting. His dog, he's like, my dog's sensing something. He's like, can you tell the change yet? I'm like, not quite yet, because it takes me a little time to get over the headache that started from the Wi-Fi being on until we unplugged it, and just feeling the dirty electricity. So once we kind of got all the filters in, I tested everything, and it was actually one of these situations where it's easy to remediate. Sometimes it isn't, and it went way down really quickly. Didn't take that many filters. And after a few minutes, I was like, yeah, I feel better. I can sit here and talk to you. And he was like, I think I feel better. And the dog felt better. The dog was different, So we're all like, oh, it feels better in here, right. And so everybody is electrosensitive. And that's kind of like what I'm always trying to get home to people. Like, it's not unique to me. I experienced it in a more dramatic way just because of me, like whatever's going on with me, maybe too much heavy. I mean, I have found that heavy metal detoxes help. There's certain things of detoxing that's help, because if you think about it, these are toxic fields. And when you have like we see it as sort of like a tipping point with some people where their threshold level of tolerance sort of like, for
their toxic load. Yeah,
toxic load. That's a good way of putting it. So getting your toxic load down is obviously going to help. But also alleviating the triggers is going to help, like reducing the toxins is obviously going to help. So there's a lot of different ways of approaching like how to deal with this. But anyway, I know I've gone on and kind of on tangents
this is great.
here.
This is very interesting. Yeah.
I definitely want to make sure we have time to talk about your book there. But
okay.
Right before we do, the one thing you mentioned just a few minutes ago was you asked your neighbor downstairs to maybe unplug their Wi-Fi at night. And, I know from my conversations with others with EHS, and by the way, I happen to agree with you that everyone is electrosensitive. It's just a matter of degree. Yeah. But people who have debilitating or severe EHS, a big part of their suffering is that, and it's separate from the exposure part. It's separate from the physiological response. It's that people simply don't even believe the condition is real. And even sometimes, I think, as you hinted earlier, not in your case, but in many cases, even their own spouses. Yes. And so how is it that you yourself deal with doubt and disbelief, and how do you advocate that others deal with doubt and disbelief?
That's a question. Yeah, that's a loaded question. Well, I'll tell you, in the case of the neighbor who was like, okay, we'll try. But then it was like such a big deal for them to push at the time, you could push a button on this stupid thing and then you could push it back on. But that was too inconvenient for them, because then they had to wait for it to like load up again. I mean, amazing, right? And they wouldn't reposition it anywhere in their house because that was just the place that worked for them. And they didn't want to do that. And so I like, they were about to go out of town. And I was like, can you please remember to turn it off before you go out of town? I mean, it really would be a huge, thing for me if it was off for a week, and they forgot. And I could tell like immediately they forgot, and I was like,
I don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. But here's the thing. When she got back and I was like, so yeah, I think you forgot to turn off your Wi-Fi when you're gone, because I had migraines again. And so, and she's like, she kind of went like, whoa, like kind of like, that must be real. Like she actually, like, she's like, she could tell, because yeah, she forgot. And another just quick story, because this is when, talking about people, everybody being electrosensitive and degrees, and also just not aware, never like making the connection, right? Because
yes,
or having opportunity to get out of these fields to even have a chance to see how you feel. I mean, because how many people are dealing with chronic fatigue and insomnia and brain fog and like when I start
Oh
having,
yeah.
when I
And
realized
anxiety and
depression,
eczema and depression. Yeah.
right. And it's like, and so when I realized what was triggering it for me, and a lot of this was like mysterious stuff for me for a couple of years before I made the links, I started noticing all my friends had these problems. And I was trying to tell them like, hey, it's this, but they thought I was a little crazy. But this woman I met when we were doing Airbnb, when we were moving cross country to Arizona, which is where we ended up going at first. I asked, in advance. The only reason I did Airbnbs because I'm like, well, I can't stay in a regular hotel. They're not going to turn off the Wi-Fi and they're not going to do these things for me. So at least on Airbnb, I could request, could you turn off Wi-Fi at night so I could sleep? I've got this issue. And so she admitted to me the next day, she thought I was a little crazy, but she didn't think I was crazy anymore when she slept the best sleep she'd had in 2 years. She ran to me and hugged me, was like in tears. She said, oh my God, I slept, it was, wow, like you solved this problem I had for 2 years. She didn't know. And so she didn't disbelieve me anymore. And that's what's going to take for people to believe you is their own experience.
Yeah.
And it's really like you can give them all the information you want, but if they don't, and that's going to be up to them, because it's like I've had to really let go a lot of personal investment in like how people perceive me or how they respond to me. It's been very trying, but also character building, I guess you could say. I mean, I've got a lot tougher skin now. I've been ridiculed enough at this point. Dr. Ole Johansson, I have an interview in my book with him, that I did exclusively with him years ago. And he said, I found not only are electrosensitive people very highly intelligent, they're definitely not crazy. And there've been like psychological tests. They had psychiatrists test them. They all test it like they're absolutely sane. He said, if anything, they're more sane or they're more tolerant, they're more able to handle abuse than everybody else. He said, because they have to, they have to get used to that and they have to know how to handle that. So I think it's really, it's been difficult for me. I've had a few members of my family that are finally kind of coming around and admitting that they just didn't understand what this was like for me or really believe it, and it's taken like this many years. I've had good friends finally admit the same, like they didn't really believe it. And now there's more awareness, out there. The more people I meet now, when I tell them, there's a huge difference between now, 9 years later, when I tell a stranger about it, and their reaction than my response 9 years ago. People
Yeah,
have
for sure.
I'm sure.
they've either heard of it or they have experienced it themselves or they have a friend who has, because of course, as we increase all these fields, like there's going to be more people reacting and figuring this out.
Yeah. And kind of speaking of awareness, I think this is a good time to kind of segue into your book a little bit. So I wanted to ask, so what you use this metaphor in the book. What is the canary in the coal mine, and why did you choose it as kind of the central metaphor of your book?
Sure. Well, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, coal miners used canary birds in the mines as a early warning system for reduced oxygen levels, higher levels of other gases, because the canary birds are extra sensitive to their oxygen needs are higher than even other birds. So they would normally be singing or on their, upright on their perches, but as long as as soon as the oxygen levels declined, then the carbon monoxide levels raised, they would stop singing or fall off their perch. Like if they fall off their perches, then it's really bad and they got to get right out of there, out of that mine quickly. So I see, and it's not just me using this metaphor. Often, people who are sensitive, extra sensitive are called canaries, or basically people who are affected first by a new toxin are the canaries. Right. And what people should be doing is listening to them rather than ignoring them and saying, oh, what's happening is we're being marginalized rather than sort of, just listen, just taken seriously. Because if we were in a healthier society, well, maybe if we were in a healthier society, this wouldn't all be happening in the first place. But because industries are running the show, they want to vilify the canaries and give them psychological labels, anything to kind of deflect away from attention onto the canaries as actually being relevant to the wider group. Because in my mind, and what I try to bring home in the book is to say that it's what people need to be doing is realizing that, okay, the canaries are the ones getting affected first, we're next. And we need to pay attention to this, because it's not like we're not going to be affected. We're all humans. We're all the same kind of biological organisms. We all get affected by the same things, and it is going to be by degrees. But to just think that like you're immune to this and somebody else isn't, I mean, it's just nonsense, utter nonsense. There's enough proof now that, I mean, none of this is healthy for anybody. It's not native to the planet. It's not something that we can, maybe we could adapt. You could argue the adaptation thing, but that would take a long
evolution
time.
doesn't
happen
go
overnight.
that quickly.
It doesn't happen in a couple
I
decades.
get asked that question too.
Yeah,
if you're thrown into the ocean, you don't develop gills by the next day.
Right. And it's not adaptation, it's compensate. What's happening now is people are compensating and they're mistaking it for adaptation. So your body's doing something to compensate. And so maybe you don't directly feel it while you're compensating, but that's a compromised condition you're putting your body into, and it's going to manifest at some point, at some way. There's just no possibility for it to not do that.
Or you have these feelings like, oh, I have really high anxiety, or oh, I'm not sleeping well, and it just doesn't occur to you that it's your cell phone or your neighbor's Wi-Fi that's a contributing factor to it, and you're like, oh, it's just my job sucks, or the world is so crazy, and so you kind of just put it off. I guess that is a form of adaptation now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your book takes an interesting approach to this topic, because I've read a lot about this, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. And so in your book, you tell your story, and you have some great interviews, like you mentioned, the one with Professor Johansson. But more than that, you tell the story of 9 other canaries. So how or why did you choose this format to tell this story?
Well, because I wanted to obviously bring home the point that it's not just me, there are others, and to make it more personalized, because I think storytelling is very powerful. And, I do interweave the scientific information for people who want, like, well, what's the mechanism? Why does it happen? But really what is going to reach people is stories and personal stories. And I wanted a variety, and also a variety of demographics, because it's not just, middle-aged women or middle-aged men or old men or young people, or, it's like all ages, all sexes, different races, different nationalities. I mean, I wasn't able to get like a huge sampling that way, but it was mostly because those people I personally encountered or were sent to me, through people I knew. So I met people along the way with my own journey, and of course got to know them and their own stories, and got permission to tell them.
That's great. And was that, I'm just wondering, was that hard or easy to get them to share this experience with you?
Well, it's interesting. At first, we were trying to do a documentary film. My partner and I, he was a documentary filmmaker. I mean, he had just graduated, had his master's in that, in a program with documentary filmmaking. So he was thinking like, he was filming me during all this, I encouraged him, I was willing to do that, but it just wasn't happening, because it was too hard for him to be caretaking me and trying to make a film about me and about us, and then not having other help to do that. We finally abandoned it. But in that process, we recorded interviews, I talked to people. So the whole time we had this documentary in mind. I eventually thought, I'll put this into a book. That's what I'll do with this. So I already had that permission. I had a lot of these interviews, a lot of these stories where I'm sort of interviewing people in them are from actual like film footage, recordings that we have. So I think a lot of people really appreciate it having their stories told, and they really were grateful. I mean, the ones who came, there were a few who didn't want to, they wanted more privacy, but a lot of the ones who obviously agreed were happy to, and really moved by like how I presented them, felt they were given a voice and felt validated that way. Yeah. It's important. I think people need, because these are marginalized people who don't have a voice, basically, and I'm just trying to give them one, as long, and obviously, and to tell my story, because like I said, even some of my own family before reading my book didn't understand as much as I tried to explain to them. Sometimes it takes like seeing a movie or reading a book or something, different
Yeah,
format.
or with sharing enough stories, there's the opportunity for people who may not understand the extreme side of it to also be able to go, oh, I do have that symptom, or oh, sometimes I do. I don't know why I don't sleep very well, and I've never really thought about it. So I think that's great. I just kind of so I just wanted to ask, for our listeners who maybe think they have EHS, or maybe they're not sure, what would be your recommendation for the first steps to kind of figure out if they are sensitive, whether it's extreme or light, or kind of a lower variation of sensitivity?
Yeah, well, kind of doing what I did initially, which was, well, even just turning your phone off more often, or putting on airplane mode. Don't, stop sleeping with it. Change some of your habits, see how you feel. Do it long enough, because I've had people sort of turn Wi-Fi off for the night or two and then say, well, it wasn't that big of a difference, but you need to do it a little bit more than that, and probably turn off more things than you think. I mean, the first thing would be getting an electrosmog meter, so that you actually know what sources you're being exposed to, because there's the obvious ones like your cell phone and your Wi-Fi, but there's a lot of other things you may have no awareness of and would never have thought about, like an electric heater or an electric blanket, or like even a clock radio next to
Or
your
the wiring in the
bed,
wall that you had no
wiring in
idea
the
Right.
was
wall.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to check those things, because you're not going to be able to do an efficient test without knowing what's on, what's there, what's on. If you've got a smart meter, that's going to be really hard, because especially if it's like right on the other side of your bed, because you can't turn that off. So even if you turned off everything else, you've got a smart meter. That's very powerful. A lot of people who don't feel they react to Wi-Fi or cell phones react to smart meters, because it's a much more powerful source of this pulsing, so that, I would say, go to a different location, try to get away,
Yeah.
try to go camping, especially if you can go camping without Wi-Fi at the campground, without a cell tower at the campground, wilderness camping, dispersed camping. And this is something too that's interesting. If you're feeling horrible, like, emotionally, like depressed, suicidal, change your environment, like go somewhere else, because you would be amazed at how different you might feel about everything in your life and everything. And it's because we're interconnected with our environment. We can't separate ourselves from that. This is, everything influences us in our environments. So to not take that seriously, I mean, it's like we kind of get trained in this mechanistic thinking of like our bodies and the world, like we have this sort of shell, like as if we're robots or something, and we're not influenced by anything around us, but we're so influenced. The first step would be turning off as much of everything in your electronics as possible, and not just at night, because at night is really important, but during the day, you don't only make melatonin at night, you make it all day long. And so the light cycling from morning till night, getting as close to natural light cycling as possible is really important. And that's one of the things that's really helped me to heal. I get up with the sun, I go down with the sun all year round. I don't use clocks or alarms. I'm up with the sun. And that circadian rhythm has been so reestablished in myself that my sleep patterns are amazing. I mean, I sleep really well now, not just because I'm away from the fields, that makes a big difference for me, but because those fields are basically light frequencies. So you want to, tune yourself into the natural world and that natural rhythm. It's healing. And so if you can get yourself back into that, then a lot of things in your body are going to heal and right themselves once you like reestablish that connection.
My next question is going to be slightly off topic, but it's obviously directly tied to the subject here. Because I was listening to another interview that you gave, and you mentioned that the changes that you've made with your, particularly regarding the internet access situation in your off-grid home, have something of a cost, and part of you wants to change that, but it's also shifted your relationship with communication and technology in
Right.
general. And that's a key theme of this podcast. So I was hoping you could share a little bit about your experience, and
Sure.
maybe for the term is liberation
Yeah.
that you feel from this. Like, what has that experience been for you?
That's right. And I really appreciate your articles and that you appreciate that aspect of this, that technology is influences in other ways besides the actual direct health impacts of the fields. You've got the whole addictive part of it. And yeah, so going off grid and not having internet at my house, I'm actually up. I'm luckily right now today able to use like a neighbor space because it's pouring rain out. I've been having normally I'm in my vehicle, and it's just kind of hard in the rain because you hear the rain and everything. But so I was able to use a neighbor space today. But I have to travel to get internet, and the phone. So that once I'm back in my home, I can't just look things up. I can't be distracted by it. It's impossible. Like I have to make a big effort to do that. And so I have to schedule my internet time. I have to schedule my phone calls. And what that's done is created this boundary, a healthier boundary around that, because the internet is basically designed to lure you in and keep you trapped in there. I mean, everything about it is designed. It's not designed as just a research tool. It's designed as a distraction tool. It's designed to like rob you of your time. And I start to get resentful of that. Once you get enough of a break from it and you realize that's what's happening, I get actually kind of angry that like my time is being stolen from me. This is my life, my one life, and it's robbing all my hours, and suddenly your life is gone. And everybody has the same complaint right now, no matter what age you are or anything, you're too busy. Why is everybody too busy? They don't have time anymore. Why is everything so fast paced? All these technologies that were supposed to save time for us and provide more leisure time have done the opposite. Who has more leisure time? They don't, because now that you can work anytime, anywhere, you're expected to work anytime,
Right.
anywhere.
Or now that somebody
Yeah.
can reach you
that,
anytime on your phone.
Hear
Yeah,
that?
right. But no, I love that, because I use this with the phone all the time. Just because my phone can ring to me anytime does not mean that I have to answer.
Right.
And that's something I'm trying to teach my nieces and nephews. Like, you don't have to answer that now. You can actually finish what you're doing
Yes.
and talk to them later.
You're not.
There was a time when
yeah, there was. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it really wasn't.
Yeah, and you're not the emergency services. People have to understand
Exactly.
that. Like they're like, well, there could be an emergency. I'm like, well, what are you even going to be able to do in an emergency for somebody? Nothing. Like you're not the there's a number for that. There's
Right.
a
I'm not
service for
911.
that.
I love that, and I'm going to borrow it. I'm not 911. I'm going to put it on a shirt.
There you go.
So you've done obviously a lot of work personally in your own life, and then writing this great book on this really, really serious issue. At the same time, we all see the direction that technology is going in, and I guess the question I want to ask, and it's one that I'm often asked myself when I'm interviewed, so I'm really keen to hear your answer. Do you have hope?
Yeah, that's the whole question.
That's the whole question.
I think, well, I do, because, and I don't know if it's a trick of nature, because I think we always have hope if we want to survive, that drives us, right? Like I keep living and facing the new day with hope, right? Because like, am I correct to believe, to have this? Is it naive of me? I hope not. I hope not. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard when gosh, because in some ways it's like you can relate this to other things we've all gone through with like the tobacco industry and the cigarette smoke, and like I would never have believed that we could have banned it everywhere. I mean, I was the canary in that case too, and life was hell going places with cigarette smoke everywhere for me. So that gives me hope. It gives me hope that, Wi-Fi has been banned from like preschools in France, and but I think that there's a resistance that will grow, and as people become more and more disillusioned with technology's promises, like we've had these promises made to us, and I think people are like Stephanie was saying, just even like, I don't need to answer the phone. A lot of people are starting to feel that way. I don't need to answer every freaking call, every text, every second of every day.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it. Like, I'm tired of it, and people are feeling tired of it. Kids are sort of nostalgic for a time they never lived. They like these shows about the 80s and stuff when people had landline phones and things, because they are tired of it too. So I think people are resisting, and I think the plans could really fall through, that are in store for us, just because, we're not robots. I don't think you can make us into robots. I think they can try and do whatever they want, but we're not. We're way beyond that, and we're spiritual beings as well, manifesting in this flesh reality, whatever. So I think that there's a part of us that says no, and that will continue to say no, and that just won't accept it. And so that's at the bottom end of the day was giving me hopes. I mean, I don't always have hope that, like, say we're going to stop 5G in town or whatever quickly, things like that. But I think on the bigger picture, and in the end of it, I do think we'll win, if you want to put it that way.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. So the book is called Wi-Fi Refugee, Plight of the Modern-day Canary. It's a fantastic read full of really useful information. Who cares about EMF exposure, EMF science, EHS, and the personal lived experiences of people with EHS. It can be found on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and we have those links in the show notes. Go out and buy it. Beyond that, Shannon, how would you like our listeners to connect with you?
Well, you can come to my website, which is wifirefugee.com, with a hyphen between the Wi-Fi and the refugee. So wifi-refugee.com, you can join my mailing list for updates on books. I'm writing other books. I mean, I co-authored another book prior to Wi-Fi Refugee called Welcome to the Masquerade. It does have a chapter on 5G and this topic in it that's pretty lengthy. Currently, I'm working on a book about I don't know if you can say the word on this program, the V word, the jab. But yeah, I'm doing, so it's more medically, I have interest in medical topics as well. So, but I do, and I plan on writing a book about addiction and technology, which I know I'm definitely going to use your articles and your website as a resource for that, for sure.
Excellent. Yeah. No, that sounds great. I'd like to read a copy of that too when that comes up. That to me it's incredibly, because even if you don't care about what tech addiction is doing to our minds, but if you care about EMF, you can't separate those out, because you're not going to be able to get people to reduce their EMF exposure until you get them to confront their behaviors and relationships with technology. So that, to me, it's a really important topic, and I'm glad to hear that you're tackling that next.
Yeah, it is. I agree. And I want to say that it's one other way of reaching out to people who don't believe in the physical harm. I think a lot of people can more easily see the social damage and the addiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for taking the time today, and thank your neighbor for giving you the space and the access to join us. This has been a really great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you for coming
on. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, R.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech Podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in the show. Please like and subscribe to the Healthier Tech Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Get your free quick start guide to building a healthier relationship with technology and our latest information at healthiertech.co.